But of course, we begin on this Monday with the countdown to the midterm election, now just one day away. Candidates spent the final weekend, of course, making one last push for undecided voters.
But the big story as we head into Election Day is early voting. More than 41 million people across the U.S. have already cast their ballot. That's 2 million more votes than were cast at this point in the 2018 midterms. It is a sign that enthusiasm in this year's election remains high before the polls even open tomorrow. 73% of both Democrats and Republicans have a high interest in this year's midterms. We're going to start in battleground Pennsylvania, which is where we find NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett. Maura, good morning to you. So the two big races there for the Senate and for governor. Tell us where things stand in both those races in these final hours.
All eyes on Pennsylvania, right, Joe? The statistical tie between Democratic candidate John Fetterman and Republican candidate for Senate Dr. Mehmet Oz is really putting a lot of pressure on the state. There's a wider lead in terms of the governor's race. The Democrat has more of a healthy bump ahead of Republican opponent Doug Mastriano. But again, there is a lot of contention because with that Senate race, this could decide who controls Congress. And so voters are feeling that, the campaign are feeling that. We saw them crisscrossing the state in recent days. Former President Trump coming out for Republicans. You saw President Biden, former President Obama coming out for Democrats over the weekend. We spent the day with a few campaigns in the suburban counties around Philadelphia, yesterday, which is those key demographic of voters that turns the state purple very often. We caught up with gubernatorial candidate Democrat Josh Shapiro to talk about how he's feeling about the race right now. I also asked him how he's feeling about the extremist views and a lot of the election-denying rhetoric we've seen from his opponent and how he thinks that might affect his race when voters turn out tomorrow. I want you to hear some of our conversation.
We had a free and fair, safe and secure election in 2020, and I was sued 43 times by the former president and enablers like Doug Mastriano. And by the way, they went 0-43. I went 43-0, and we were able to have a secure election. I've been incredibly humbled of the sheer number of Republicans who have been willing to take off the red jersey and just put on the Pennsylvania jersey and do what's right, reject Doug Mastriano's dangerous extremism, and join our campaign because they understand our democracy and our freedom is at stake.
And so something that was interesting we saw yesterday that we did not see very often in recent months was Fetterman and Shapiro campaigning together in an apparent attempt, it seemed, to carry for Democrats Fetterman across that finish line because that race against Oz and that Senate race is so tight right now. Again, a lot of pressure leading up to Election Day tomorrow here in Pennsylvania, Joe.
So when it comes to that close Senate race, what is it you're hearing from voters?
Voters, because of that pressure, are feeling anxious. We heard it across the board from Republicans, Democrats, in between at campaign rallies across the state this week. And I want to hear from some voters on both sides of the aisle that we spoke to and kind of how they're thinking in their most important issues.
I'm a little bit nervous about it, for sure. Very nervous. I think I have the same opinion as most Trump supporters about what actually happened. Can't prove it, but I don't know.
Having a candidate in office that speaks for everybody and not just his own personal beliefs on a lot of issues. What's on the ballot is severe and important, and having a candidate who's actually listening.
I'd like to see mail-in voting go away. Obviously, the absentee ballots I don't have an issue with. You actually have to prove that you are who you say you are.
I don't know that I could ever see myself having an abortion, but that's my choice. And someone else should be able to have their choice. I shouldn't be able to tell someone, what their choice should be. So I'm really concerned about that.
Now, on top of the pressure of this race and who exactly voters will be voting for is the question of whether voters will accept the election results. Pennsylvania is one of those that is expected to take probably several days in counting. It takes them a while to count their mail-in ballots. You heard from several voters here their hesitancy around the election. There was a lot of debate from Republicans specifically around election fraud in 2020. Obviously, the state is doing as much as they can to ensure that people feel confident and are able to vote safely and fairly, but that is something that campaigns, voters are anticipating even after Election Day wraps up tomorrow.
Variety of issues pushing people to the polls. So, Maura, quickly, this is the last full day of campaigning. What can we expect there in Pennsylvania?
Well, the closing argument ads are up on TV. You turn on TV here, you cannot escape any of those political ads. Campaigns are all over social media. Surrogates coming out yesterday. Kerry Washington here for Democrats. We saw Republicans Susan Collins at a roundtable with Dr. Oz. There's several campaign events again across the state as they make their final closing arguments to voters to get them to rally for each of their sides. But we will be watching it closely here in Pennsylvania.
We know you will, Maura. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.